It was one of those early storms we had, either the very beginning of this month or the very end of last month, and I had just gotten home as the storm, I guess, was moving through the valley and up into the foothills, and I got out of the car and kind of glanced up, and there was this very big cloud. And then I did a double take. That's a really big cloud. Huge. I'm talking one ginormous cumulonimbus monster. And it seemed like it just went, one of those sort of magnificently defined, right? It looked like you could touch it. And it just went up and up and up. And I started thinking, how high is that? Is that like 100 feet or hundreds of feet? And I started to mentally imagine, football fields piled on top of each other or something. How big is that? And then after a while, I realized I was just standing there staring up as people are going by. And so I kind of went, okay. So I kind of let it go, and I went in the house, and I forgot all about it until I read this passage. And that moment came back to me of how that one huge, beautiful cloud brought wonder to my heart. And then I thought about other things in the sky that have brought wonder to my heart. And I immediately went to sunbeams. Sunbeams do that to me. Do you ever stand and stare at the sunbeams? I kind of catch my breath. There's something about them that I feel like the presence of God is just almost tangible in them. There's something about that streaming of light that we don't always see, and suddenly it's there, right? For me, it's mostly when it's in the dawn and it's coming through those clouds, kind of announcing that yet again God is blessing us with God's presence. What are some of the things that you see in the sky that have filled your heart with wonder? When you're looking up, Rainbows. Ever seen a double or triple rainbow? Especially going north, huh, Kate? Yeah. You have a big sky above you. What else do you see in the sky? Stars. Yes. Have you been somewhere not in the U.S. where you can actually see the Milky Way look milky? It's almost unnerving how milky it is. Yes, the planets. Did you know that last month, or I think it was actually October, Mars was the closest it will be for a long time, and it was so unbelievably red, right? It was beautifully red. Anything else? This is the time of year those Canadians, not the ones who live in the next country, I mean the ones that fly. Suddenly the geese just rise up together and boom. Isn't that a beautiful, breathtaking thing to see? Yes, on my bucket list. The Aurora Borealis. It's worth my bucket list, isn't it? That's what everybody tells me. So many things that we see in the sky that call our hearts to wonder. It must have been like that for those poor, unsuspecting shepherds, right? Living in the fields. Did you notice Luke said that? They hadn't just gone there for the day or the evening. They lived there. They were there every night, every day, all day long. And this had never happened before. So you can imagine what filled their hearts. What do you think filled their hearts? Fear. At least according to Luke. They were terrified. Now here's the thing. I don't believe they were terrified because they didn't know what was going on. I think they knew exactly what was going on. And it scared them because they knew, having been versed in the Hebrew Scriptures, they knew what the Shekinah was. The Shekinah is the glory of God. That's the Hebrew word. And the glory of God throughout the whole of the Hebrew Scriptures comes as light, or some form of light, fire, right? A glory that is streaming and glowing or shining or burning. The burning bush, the chariot of fire, the fiery pillar. This is God being present in a way humans can barely handle it. And suddenly, right there in their field, is the Shekinah of God. And so they were afraid. But then the angel speaks. This Shekinah is not to fear, but for you to rejoice. I bring you good news of great joy. To you, here's why we're here, to you is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is the Messiah. Can you imagine getting that kind of news if you're a Jew in that century? The Messiah has arrived. And you get to know. And that, I hope, is the moment that their hearts turned from fear to wonder. And so Luke tells us they got up to go check it out, and they went to Bethlehem, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby Messiah. Probably surprised them, although the angel said, here's the sign, it's going to be an infant, not the big guy on a horse you might have been waiting for, but a tiny baby. And when they left, the shepherds told everybody else about it, and they went back to their fields, glorifying and praising God. Their hearts were filled with wonder, certainly, at that point. Let me dig a little bit deeper into this word we use called wonder. Wonder. I'm convinced that there's something particular in this word that I don't want us to miss in the second Sunday of Advent. Because wonder has an element in it where we find ourselves more than just amazed or appreciating the magnificence of the beauty of a thing. There's an element of being stupefied. You know that word? Kind of dumbstruck, and I'm emphasis on the dumb. Wonder has a little edge to it where our hearts are filled, and yet our minds can't quite get around what we are experiencing, right? Isn't there that little bit of that in wonder? There's some ways that we're just, wow, I can't quite understand, but it's wonderful, right? And for many people at Christmas, the only wonder there is children wondering what toys they're going to get, right? But Luke tells us that at Christmas, the wonder is the unimaginable, incomprehensible arrival of God, Emmanuel, God with us, in our presence, in our midst, one of us. Unbelievable. There's wonder in the very idea of Emmanuel. Our hearts get it, and our minds just say, what is that? This summer, I heard Bishop Elaine Stanofsky share a story of a time when she was in line at the grocery store. You know how you've got all your groceries there and your reusable bags, and she's standing there filling up her reusable bags when she becomes aware of the predicament of the man who is just following her, and it was one of those really awkward moments where he discovers, oops, I don't have enough money for all the groceries I've got here on the counter. And so he started, picking apart what he was going to leave behind and what he was going to take. And Bishop Stanovsky kind of leaned over and said, "Excuse me, if it's okay, I'd like to pay for those." And the man looked at her and said, "What?" And the checker said, "Hon, if you want to buy some of those, I can help you after him." And she said, "No, I'd like to pay for those groceries." And again, the checker said, "Well, which item do you want?" And as I recall her telling, it took her like 3 or 4 attempts before she could help them understand that she wanted to pay for the groceries he couldn't afford for him to take home. And as she told the story, she was reflecting on that, and she was sad because she felt like we live now in a world where that concept, the idea that someone would simply do a good turn for a neighbor, or even a stranger, is unthinkable, unimaginable, incomprehensible. But what I heard was how God's good news still brings wonder to people's hearts. And the man was very, very grateful for her gift. They finally let her do it. Sometimes that Shekinah, that presence of God, is just too much for us mere mortals. Let me increase the magnitude of that story and the magnanimity by many, many, many orders. Anybody ever heard of RIP, RIP medical debt? Me neither. Oh, somebody has, yes? It's a relatively new charity, 2014, when it was established by 2 men who were debt collectors. And their job was to collect on people's medical debt. If I had to guess how much medical debt is in this room, I'd pile a lot of football fields up, right? Going higher and higher. But imagine the medical debt in this country with a broken health care system and health delivery system. Well, these men started seeing the crushing burden of medical debt in people's lives as they demanded it be paid. And they repented, they converted, they turned around and changed their behavior. Partly because some new laws had been passed, but they realized that what they could do was purchase debt on pennies for the dollar and forgive it. And so some 2 women in Ithaca, I love this, 2 women in Ithaca just got their friends together and did what women do, and they raised $12,500 to send to RIP medical debt. And that forgave $1.5 million. And I think it was something like 9 counties in New York State. There were people, I think over 1,000 people. Well, word started getting out, and John Oliver decided he wanted to take a swing at it, and so he raised $60,000 on his talk show. $60,000 forgave $14 million of people's medical debt. Can you imagine? Now, the cynics among us can say, well, that's a drop in the $750 billion of medical debt out there. And yes, it is. But can you imagine this Christmas or any day of the year if you're struggling to make ends meet and you get one of these yellow envelopes in the mail telling you that your medical debt has been forgiven? I think there's a lot of hearts where wonder becomes joy. Don't you? The old carol said, "And ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low." Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. It was old Satchmo, remember? Louis, who sang, "What a wonderful world, but it is God who makes it so." Remember the wonder of God's presence as you give this morning.